All right, so in this episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about my process, partially because I think it is going to come up in a lot of the conversations I've been having. I think I've brought it up twice today, and so I felt like it'd be a good idea to go through it. And if I have time after that, I'm going to try to delve a little bit into what I was talking about a couple episodes ago, last episode, about, well, if I have time, I'll get into it. So, I'm very grateful to have as many people as I have willing to listen to my my crazy conjectures, because that's all I can say for my thoughts and my ideas. They're conjecture. I don't have a body of research to confirm any of it. What I have instead is a network of ideas that appear to support each other very well and seem very practical and very useful. But they obviously need to be proven. They need to have evidence shown for them. And one of those is the process I use itself to develop ideas. So in contrast, I'll talk a little bit about Ian McGilchrist, who, well, I'll get into that. A little bit about Ian McGilchrist and a little bit about the scientific method. Which I think I've talked about these things. The scientific method is about the externalization of observation. It is a methodology that tries to remove the person from the experiment, basically. And it does that by using controls, by using measurements, by supposedly being reproducible. Ideally. Although, well, I won't get into that because this isn't an episode on science. I want to do that, but that's not what this is. A lot of the process that science goes through is what Ian McGilchrist seems to call, well, I don't know if he calls it this, but it's basically the way his thesis suggests that the left brain functions. Which is to say, and these are my words, but they seem parallel to what Ian is doing. I believe the left brain commits a bias that has hitherto not been diagnosed, I don't think. So be skeptical, because I'm making an argument that I don't know is very well founded, but this seems very true to be the case. And that is that, come on, Brady. I went to grab it and it was gone. The form of bias is, the singular linear is what I call it. The singular linear is a very efficient methodology for simplifying situations. But that doesn't mean it is accurate. It is quick. It gets us to answers that then we feel very confident about, very certain, and will even be reluctant to give up once we've given our certainty. And that is, of course, a type of bias as well. I'm forgetting the name of it. But I am, I suppose, arguing for how that bias forms, which is that I'm going to lose my train of thought again. Well, I am driving. That does tend to make lose one's train of thought. Anyway, okay, singular linear is the process by which we grasp something quickly. It's usually our first grasp of it, and then we go, aha, I've got it. This is the cause. Notice the cause, the singular cause. Sorry, got distracted. That is where the bias comes in, is assuming that there is only one cause, that one has established it. The thing is that even when one is able to simplify one's, even when one is willing to simplify one's assumptions, even when one is humble enough to go, oh wait, I was wrong, it's this other thing, the problem is the bias continues. It is this other specific thing, this singular thing, which I can then create linear arguments and conclusions from, and be so certain that I've reached something certain, so to speak. Whereas to thwart this bias, one has to realize that there may be very complex systems involved which have many causes and many effects. And if one is not looking, if one is not broadening one's awareness to engulf every possible cause and every possible effect, and creating this systemic network of cause-effect relationships, then one may simply be using, although they might be complicated, they will not be complex arguments. A complicated argument can be singular linear. A complex argument cannot. It cannot be reduced down to that. Okay, so how does one do that? And I would suggest, and this is where I will be butting up against the very bias I'm describing when I describe how I do this. I'll tell you how in a moment. So the singular linear, the way out of a singular linear bias and the way to create not a complex but not a complicated but a complex argument has to do with the way the right brain functions, which is global, which is through intuition, which is through innovation and all the fluttery, bizarre things that people get really scared of because they result in very bad effects if not properly controlled. And I will argue you control it with the left brain, but you have to let the right brain drive. The left brain can't drive. The left brain wants to drive. It wants to grasp and say, aha, we are certain now, we have the answer. The right brain is just like, answers? What do you mean? There's just so much going on. And it's because for it, it's not looking for a single point to focus on. It's looking for everything. It is global. It is, I almost said absolute, in the sense that's correct. Although not absolute in the absolute certain sense. The right brain is looking to see how everything in the field you are giving it control over connects. And you can vary that control, or at least I think you can with practice. I will eventually do a video using art as a exemplar of how the right brain thinks. Gosh, I'm excited about that video. Anyway, because I think it'll help people see what I'm talking about. So let me think. My process, therefore, in developing all my concepts has been to listen to arguments, to listen to data, to hear people out, usually podcasts, audiobooks, that kind of thing. And instead of right brain grasping what they're saying, which I brought up the story before, but I once had a philosophy instructor tell me, you're going to want to think of all the creative ways you can use these arguments and way you can build on them and develop them. Don't do that, he said. Basically grasp it with your right brain or your left brain and learn from that. Which there's some truth there. I mean, it's not that you don't want to learn why they built the arguments they did. You don't want to be so unfocused that you're just blazing around and there's no discipline, because the discipline is how you control the right brain. But again, you don't let the left brain drive, even though it is the control, the brakes for the right brain. The left brain is what is so skilled at establishing fact and evidence and scientific rigor. But the right brain is how we innovate and how we see around the boxes we put ourselves in through the left brain. Left brain is great at establishing boxes. The problem is we get stuck in those boxes if we get stuck in the left brain mode. So, I hope I didn't say left brain when I meant right brain too many times in those statements. Hopefully you understood from the context what I meant. My process, therefore, has been to have as logical and fine-tuned a left brain as possible, but to not let it control. To instead, every time I'm listening to something, if my right brain wants to do something, if it wants to go out on a lark that seems completely unrelated to grasping the facts at hand, I let it. I pause the podcast and I go that way. And generally that will connect to many other podcasts on the same topic, and more importantly, the trails that came from that. Because once you have those trails overlapping in echoing sequences, you can start building a pattern from that then. And so you start distancing yourself from the box that was created, and you start creating this web of ideas that can give you a whole new look on, a whole new paradigm, a whole new perspective. Paradigms are powerful. They are the glasses through which we see reality, see scientific evidence. It's how we interpret evidence. I often have tried to scratch that. I think it is the case that the most powerful thing science gives us is measurements. That is to say, the process by which we can establish a measurement. That is not the same thing. That data is not the same thing as how we interpret and use that measurement, though. The measurement cannot change. It will not change. You can always do it. Even if you find out it doesn't establish what you think it is, it might turn out to be, this doesn't actually prove anything, like an experiment from 80 years ago, 100 years ago, is probably overturned by now, or at least many of them are. But the experiment still works, right? It just doesn't prove what they think it does. The measurement always is true. But we have to be able to get out of that box and make new connections and find new ways of discovering how to interpret that data, that truth that we've discovered, that observation. I like measurement, the term measurement, to describe it, because it speaks of standardization. Even if you're using a control, that control acts as your mode of measurement. That's why I think it's a really good term. Terms. I try to name my concepts based off of what the right brain is looking for, is open to, is seeing all the ways that word resonates. That's not to say any of my terms are that great. I'm just saying that I use that term. I've actually discovered that it causes a lot of problems when I use terms that are used for other things. Originally I named a lot of things. I redefined a lot of terms is what I was doing, because I wanted to find the way those terms can best be used, networked together in a more efficient way than we've used them. But I've discovered every time I do that, it unfortunately leads to tons of confusion. So I'm trying to decide what kind of methodology to use instead. So should I go any further with that? That was pretty good. I might have been able to add some more to it, but that was pretty good. I guess since I'm in the driveway and my kids are not pounding on the windows, I'll go a little bit into the other topic, which is minimal concepts and optimal concepts, which are in fact minimal concepts, which is, I was confused for a while and I thought Vervaeke was speaking of the same idea as I was, and I use them differently because I'm speaking of pure concepts, not something like the embodiment of a physical conceptual grasp. So my use of minimal or of optimal grasp or of optimal concept is smaller than optimal grasp. So what I mean by a minimal concept, a concept that you minimally grasp, again, different use of term. Sorry to use it, but it just fits. We mean something like a memeified grasp on the concept. I think that's good. Maybe there's minimal and then there's also memeified. I think that maybe that's better, because minimal is fairly complex, complicated. It can be, at least. Whereas a meme is not complicated at all. That's its beauty and genius. But then a minimal grasp is more like the introduction to a complicated concept. It's as essential a abstraction of the concept as can be managed without betraying the concept, which most minimalizations, most abstractions tend to do some kind of damage, but we should be okay with that. I mean, every concept we make should be seen as a frame through which we see other frames. I think, have I done a video on that? I don't know. The frame-to-frame principle is the idea that whatever set of principles I have, they are not the things themselves. They are not the thing to grasp as the left brain does, but they are a frame by which we are, again, a paradigm through which we can then go, maybe this frame is wrong, but it's letting me see something, and then I move through that frame and I establish a new one, a new set of principles. That's why you can look at ancient Greek philosophers and learn from them, learn their frame, and then move on from it. Philosophy is this amazing movement of frames, from frame to frame to frame. In a very similar vein, when you go from a minimal to how do I say this? You go from the concept. You've worked very hard. You've got all this data, and you've tried to develop this. I'm making a mistake. I'll keep going though. You try to synthesize all these ideas together, and you're trying to create as true a concept as you possibly can. That is something like an optimal form. Actually, no. Let's call that the raw form, or the raw optimal. That's a great term. I like that. The raw optimal form. You're still in development. You still have, if you're humble and if you can move to the right brain, you can realize this is not quite complete. It's not complete and accurate. Those are my two most important terms for deciding how a concept is formed. Is it complete? Is it accurate? And then afterwards you decide if it is aligned with other ones, which aligns with this whole idea I'm talking about now of the minimal, the optimal, the memeified. When you have a concept completed, accurate, and aligned with all the very relevant peripheral concepts, then you have an optimal concept. But the optimal concept should be built out of minimal concepts, which is to say, you should have been able to minimize, to abstractify, to simplify every part of that entire network of concepts that creates the optimal one. All the different layers, zooming in, zooming out, as my friend Brett, Pleasure of Doubt, speaks of. Then, and the reason you're doing this, the reason I held my finger instead of making a mistake, the reason you're doing all this is because then the whole concept is not only as complete and accurate as possible to reality, but it is most memeifiable. You can take any part of an optimal concept, if it is made out of minimal concepts, and immediately pull that into a meme, so that you can create meme dialogues, if you will, and yet have them reflect as accurately as possible the optimal order of concepts. This is a format, if you will, of how to make concepts as spreadable as possible, as memifiable, as generalizable to the public as possible. Why would you want to do that? Hopefully you want to do that because you want to see humanity better. That gets into the whole Game B series that I need to do. Okay. I think that's all I'm going to do for this video. I should split this in half, but I don't know how to do that on an iPhone video, so I'm not going to. Thank you.